Good morning. This is the Thursday, October 12th, 2023 Town Council Budget Meeting. It is 9 a.m. In chambers, we have Adrian Christie, Jesse Ray Arguez, myself, and participating remotely, we have Geneva Shawnette. We are going to start with work session 1A, discussion of open space fund, the affordable housing fund, and all other funds. We have Kaylee Ranta, Scott Robson, and Zoe Bernal.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This is Scott, and just really wanted to thank staff, our department heads, our finance department, Kaylee Ranta in particular, for all the good work leading up to this budget discussion today. We are multiple meetings in now and several months into the process, and within a meeting or two here of adoption, hopefully. But today we have a roll up of our open space, affordable housing, and many other funds. So Kaylee's got a good overview of how some of the funds work and kind of where we sit on various balances. Again, since our last budget focused meeting, we've continued to do some refinement based on council's input of the budget. And I'm pleased right now where we're sitting in regards to our likely general reserve percentage for next year, and our ability to fit in some critical new FTEs as well, and where we're at as we roll up 2023. I think, again, in some of our key budgetary areas, from sales tax to RET to just our overall bottom line, we're ahead of budget in a positive way. And we're, again, thankful to our departments for staying very tight and diligent on their budgets throughout the course of the year. And again, we'll wrap up this year well, and I'm optimistic and really happy with how this budget is shaping up so far based on council's input and council's or staff's input. So with that, I'll hand it up to our finance director, Kaylee Ranta, and I think a little bit later we'll have Zoe Denal, our deputy town manager, weigh in on some other funds as well. So Kaylee, I hand it off to you.
Thank you, Scott. Just kind of look at the calendar where we started this process back in July internally. The staff began preparing their budgets, and then on August 17th, we had the director's budget retreat, which we started doing last year, which has proven to be very helpful for all of us to get together before starting this process. And then on September 7th, we had the town council meeting going over goals and objectives. On the 12th, we went over the capital fund. On September 21st, we went over the general fund. And then on October 3rd, we looked at enterprise funds. And today we will kind of be looking at all of the funds, mainly affordable housing and open space that we haven't looked at, as well as a couple other small funds. And then adoption of the 2024 budget at your next meeting on the 24th. We will start out with the debt service fund, which accounts for special assessment debt service requirements, special assessment levies, general obligation debt service, and lease purchase agreements. And this is basically a pass-through fund. It accounts for a portion of the 2013 COP, which was refunded in 2021 and is connected with the Marshalls building. The original financing was for the Pandora water plant. And this is a $25,000 annual debt payment, which is funded by a transfer from the general fund. And then also new this year is the commercial portion of the Voodoo project, which is $24,000 transfer from the capital fund. And then this fund balance is basically zero every year with those transfers and the debt payments. And then the restricted fund, we only have one of these, and it includes revenues and donations that are restricted and must be used for certain purposes. We have several different revenue sources coming into this fund. Oops. Examples of the revenues are the paper bag fee, dog surcharge fee, tree fee, Parks and Rec donations, and Marshalls donations. And all of these revenues must be used for those specific purposes. And internally, we keep track of what kind of the balance is for each of those revenue sources to be spent each year. And then any additional revenue from the festival attendance fee is transferred from the general fund to the restricted fund. Any questions on either of those so far? Okay, the energy mitigation fund accounts for green energy fees charged by the town through building permits, which are in turn to be used for energy conservation projects and to offset the town's carbon footprints. The revenues coming into this fund are temp fees and green building fees. The revenues are used for conservation projects within the town. The largest project most recently was the Sunnyside Net Zero project. It helps to fund green grant programs with Eco Action Partners and is used for climate action plan projects. With all of the budget requests for this year, we do have a negative change in fund balance of $77,000. So we're looking for council input as to how to balance this fund. So the main expenses are $15,000 for energy projects, $105,000 for the sustainability program, and $150,000 for green grants. Do you want to talk about it?
So green grants is a change. That was a double ask. And this is just brought to council's attention. When it comes to the climate action plan, obviously there are two ways to accomplish the goals of the climate action plan: policy and incentive. We don't really have the funds for the incentive arm. Really, it was just the $75,000 for the green grants. That's kind of how it was done. I don't need to really tell you about comparable communities, but if you want to hear what other communities are, their incentive funds look like, it is more than double, even this double of what the town of Telluride currently has. So I just wanted to bring that to council's attention to kind of that tool and what is lacking for those goals. So right now we're asking for just a double. We're trying to get more and more people to sign up for green grants. I think I've talked to council before on how maybe we can look at green grants a little differently to accomplish our goals. It's not such a big wide net of an incentive, but we are working toward getting more and more people to apply for that for the future. But I want council to start thinking about where those incentive funds can come from for the future.
I guess I don't really want to go down the rabbit hole of like what those incentives are, but I feel like it would be helpful for us to, if we're gonna put money towards it and not enough money towards it, why would we do that?
I think that's a great question.
Okay.
So right now it's just the green grants. So, and it is every year, it is, last year was 75, the first year was done, it was 75. Every year that money is given out. The way green grants is structured is it is up to a certain amount. Green grants, what they have accomplished, they've done really good work with building retrofits, because those are such large capital projects for people, and it makes such a big difference for greenhouse gas reduction, especially in this community. So I think it's a really good tool that way. Our hope is to have, but people aren't going to apply, especially those of lower income, when the match is so great. So the more money we can offer for people to do things like building retrofits, the greater net of people that it actually can be beneficial to.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood what you were saying. So you're saying the Green Grants program is an incentive program?
Yep.
I thought you were saying
I want more.
$75,000.
No, I'm just saying in the future, like
Got it.
this is a start, but
Got
I
it, okay.
think we should keep thinking about.
Sorry, I misunderstood you.
No, that's great.
I am 100% in favor of green grants. I have utilized them myself, caveat, just so you all know, but I think that it's, in addition to it being an energy component, I think it's also a really great opportunity for our people who live in deed restricted housing to be able to upgrade their homes with a huge subsidy. As someone who lives in one of the older deed restricted units, it's nice to know that I could theoretically get some help on getting my windows replaced or whatever else it may be. So anyway, that was a lot to just say yes. But are you accounting for any, these temp fees and green buildings fees don't account for any increase in any of the licenses that we've talked about, right?
Nope, not this year.
So to do this, we need to put money in this fund.
Or
Or take it down for this year and look at raising those fees for next year, either way. This is me getting you guys to talk about it.
Oh, well, I'll keep talking. In my opinion, Green Grants is a kind of a case equivalent in terms of putting direct dollars into our community to boost our economy, to support individuals who are struggling right now. So for me, pulling money, I don't know if you have a recommendation from where it should come from, but I'm in favor of making sure that we're directly supporting individuals in this kind of work.
I agree.
Yeah,
Do you guys have an idea of where it can come from, or can we circle back to this after we like review the rest of the budget? Cause I feel like,
yeah, I think at this point, so usually, obviously. A transfer comes from the general fund. We're just not in a position for that this year either. In my opinion.
yeah, maybe do a transfer from the town lodgers tax fund.
Everything's pretty tight. So I think we can circle back on that, but everything is pretty tight this year. So I appreciate that hearing council support on moving forward. And I think the true thing we should look at is probably raising the revenue source for this. And whether I think then that's a staff direction and we need to just figure out the timing for that.
can you break down what that looks like if we were to raise those fees? Like how many people to
can't.
offset? Yeah.
Not like right now, but I think I get that direction and I will do that.
Great.
Want to add that the energy projects, which it looks like the budget's pretty low for next year, but that's my understanding is that helps departments implement the climate action plan at the department level. So I think we're talking about giving funds externally, but for departments to be able to meet our goals for decreasing our energy use, I think it's important to have more money in this fund as well, if that's a future discussion, because we do utilize not as much as Sunnyside utilized, but small amounts to upgrade facilities, replace equipment, make mechanical equipment function more efficiently so that we cut down on our utilities. So looks like there won't be much available for next year for departments to utilize with what's being proposed. But for the future, it'd be great to have that assistance for departments to implement the town's goals.
Can I ask a quick question? Because I think last year when we were discussing the Green Grants program and working with Eco Action Partners, there was discussion about town wanting to have a little bit more input
Which we
to
do.
the process.
Yep.
Okay, I just want to make sure that
It's
that
a whole
was
new
taken
process
care
this
of.
year.
Okay.
We're using very similar to CASE now, the
Okay.
Go Smart. Yes, it's a much more streamlined process.
Perfect.
I mean, I guess with regards to the cap, we talked about it at a council level in terms of like, sure, this all sounds great, but
Yep.
we've never really had a discussion about the funding of it and
Yes.
how all of that will go down. And so maybe that's a future work session
This
that
is,
is,
I agree with that.
yeah.
I think, and I mean, in order to accomplish those goals, there needs to be a dedicated revenue source. So that's what we need to talk about. And I think Jesse Ray made a good point of how to look at that. So I think this is a starting point for everyone to recognize that conversation and that a future work session. Okay.
Go ahead. All right, we'll move on to the open space fund. And we did pay off all of the debt on this in the past years. We've been able to reallocate 15% of the revenues that were coming into this fund into that reserve capital improvement fund. And this fund accounts for the acquisition and maintenance of open space. Reserves are developed over time and used to acquire property and pay debt on purchases. So the revenue now comes from 5% of sales and use tax, property tax, motor vehicle tax, business and building licenses, and real estate transfer tax. We did reallocate the program manager labor costs from the general fund into the open space and affordable housing funds. And then removed the admin fee, which was doing that more as a transfer. And all additional revenue not spent during the year is budgeted to a set aside account, making this fund balance 0 at year end. So for 2024, the set aside is $4.38 million. And here's a new flow chart of how those 20% of those revenues work. 15% of sales and use tax, property tax, business and building licenses from the general fund is transferred to the reserve capital improvement fund, and then 5% goes to the open space fund, with the exception of the business and building licenses, where 74% of that is dedicated to marketing. And then from the capital fund, 15% of the real estate transfer tax goes to the reserve capital improvement fund and 5% to the open space fund.
Sorry, quickly, I'm curious why you suggest that theoretically paying for the previous fund that we were talking about would be coming from the general fund when it could come from this fund. I know this fund is funding other things, but I also feel like the spirit of those dollars is open space, and I don't know, I link that to like climate work as well. And so
Open space fund money?
The
Is that what you're
reserve
saying?
capital.
Go
no, the
for-
reserve capital
excuse me.
improvement fund, sorry, I know you're talking about, sorry. But anyway, just.
So for the environmental work, looking to
Yes.
take money out of the capital improvement. fund.
Yes, sorry.
Maybe like
Reserve
specifically for like
capital.
the town projects.
Sure,
piece.
something along those
Yeah.
lines.
I think we can look, I think that could be part of the.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly a
Mhm.
plausible route to move forward. And
Mhm.
one we haven't talked in depth with, just knowing that the wastewater treatment plant needs are what's taking up the full dedication of it now, but it doesn't mean it has to be 100%. We're seeing some priorities around climate action plan that needs a little more boost, or green grants that need more boost.
Great, sorry to
No, that's great. Thank you, Adrian.
interject randomly.
The transportation fund accounts for the town's Galloping Goose transit operations. It is mainly funded by a transfer from the capital fund, with the exception of an operating grant that we've been lucky enough to receive pretty much annually. So for 2024, we've been approved for an operating grant of $153,000. And then in November of 2022, employees were transitioned to full-time year-round to be compliant with standards, so they now receive full town benefits.
Kind of a strange question. Transportation, like authorities and other places usually charge like taxi services and things of that nature. There's like some sort of agreement with the city and transportation authorities, taxis, trains, buses, whatever. We manage most of it, but there are some taxi services here. I'm wondering if we've ever even entertained the idea, just trying to think of other revenue streams for the town, of doing some sort of transportation authority and working with people who are moving people from airports to town all around, and I don't know. Very strange. I realize it's like maybe not applicable to a small town like us, but
Well, I think there's always that important conversation of the last mile, if you will, on any transportation network, and we know those private services play an important role there. It's certainly a good conversation to have with the David Averils of the world, and smart also in regards to long-term, how do we continue to grow our regional service, but maybe, as you're alluding to, pull in some of the shorter what today are covered by private services. I'm not sure if you're looking at that as a potential revenue source, or because typically those short services are relatively highly subsidized services, but it certainly could be something we talk about as a part of a bigger public transportation network.
right, like I'm talking more about the private transportation, like Terra Express and Mountain Limo. I'm just wondering
That feels, I mean, since Smart is already like, Grad Express already operates all of Smart's buses, maybe that's something to come to Smart with and say, is there any chance to have?
We can bring it up.
Yeah, bring it up.
We
at a
could,
Smart
yeah,
meeting.
maybe it would be worth thinking that going, doing some research about, I think, yeah,
Yeah,
and talking to
I
people.
mean, similar to like the airport taxes that they all,
Exactly,
so, funds. So, okay, I can bring that up. It's fine.
okay. That's good.
Okay, here is a chart of all the taxes that are collected by the town of Telluride. We have been over this before, but I'll just go over it quickly again. The 4.5% sales and use tax, 0.5% off the top of that goes to the Affordable Housing Fund. And then the remaining 4% goes to general fund. 20% of that 4% is then transferred to open space in the Reserve Capital Improvement Fund. The 2% food and lodgers excise tax, the town retains 2% of that as an administrative fee in the general fund. Remainder goes to the airline guarantee fund. And then the short-term rental excise tax of 2.5% is all dedicated to affordable housing. And the 2% town lodgers tax all goes into the town lodgers tax fund. So a few of those taxes go into the affordable housing fund, the 0.5% sales tax. And then the 2.5% short-term rental excise tax, as well as housing mitigation fees, a 2 mil property tax levy, and then we have also included in the 2024 budget, the short-term rental regulatory fee. The Affordable Housing Fund finances the development and preservation of affordable housing for the town. Our 2024 revenue projections are for sales tax consistent with the general fund with a 5% increase from 2023 projected year end. And for the short-term rental excise tax and all lodging taxes, we have budgeted that with a 5% decrease from the 2023 projected year end.
Talk
Do
a
you
little bit more
wanna talk about that?
Yeah. So obviously, this is always a moving target, and I just got more up-to-date numbers from Kira this morning, but when we were doing the forecasting, Telluride's occupancy was down 20% year over year. And even though ADR was up 6%, today occupancy right now is down 7% and ADR is up 1%. So it's still trending slightly down. However, the reason sales tax is up is because overall the destination occupancy is up. Mountain Village, who has that majority of the lodging up there, they're pacing 39% up year over year on occupancy. So that's where we left it. So right now for the lodging tax, I think it still would be conservative to have it decrease 5%. Even though perhaps it might be more closer to flat, it's just hard to say right now.
You mean the excise tax?
Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Just making- So you have, what is that number specifically, or does that, I mean, I know it doesn't specifically matter, but in the revenues, it's just taxes. It's not broken down. Do you have a sense of that?
Like how
Excise
much?
The
tax,
dollar
The-
amount,
doesn't really matter. I was just curious.
The dollar amount
We've got-
going into the Affordable Housing Fund for the short-term rental excise tax.
Yes.
Is that what you're asking? Yeah. $1,168,000.
And that's projected. That's your budgeted number.
That is the
Okay.
2024 budget.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Any questions? Anyone feel good about that?
and the 5% decrease.
Yep.
From last year is just because we saw a decrease the previous year, or why?
It's because we were pacing occupancy specifically here was pacing down
Okay.
Mhm.
So we're
and
just trying to
ADR was also pacing
Be
down.
consistent with the trend.
Yep,
Mhm.
because of the trend. While we're pacing less down now, things are still flushing out. But the reason why it's always interesting to have a lower lodging tax, a decrease in lodging tax, but an increase in sales tax. And that's just because overall the destination occupancy is much higher. So we're just not having the lodging here in Telluride.
That makes sense.
And then also in the Affordable Housing Fund, we have reallocated those labor costs from the general fund into open space and affordable housing and removed the administrative fee. And then like the open space fund, all additional revenue not spent during the year is budgeted to a set aside account, making the fund balance 0. For 2024 budgeted revenues, there's a 47% increase in the property tax revenue due to valuations going up. The short-term rental regulatory fee, we're budgeting $1.3 million. Voodoo bond proceeds, and this is just for the housing portion of that project, of $13.4 million. And as well as a DOLA grant for $2 million for Voodoo. And then a $50,000 DOLA grant for a housing mitigation fee study, which pays for a majority of that study. And then $5.1 million is available in that set aside.
Kaylee, do you remember off the top of your head what our bond payments are for Voodoo, like what the timeline is on that, like when our first payment is, or
We're paying on it this year.
this year, and then the next one is it 5 years or 6 years? Lance, do you know?
Lance McDonald. Yeah, so it's a drawdown bond, so we're only paying interest on the amount that we're drawing down.
Okay,
So the interest payment this year is going to be pretty small. It'll be bigger next year. We can also use capitalize some of the interest that we're incurring during that period, as we size the bond to pay for some of that as well to lower our bond expenses during construction. So and then it amortizes over 30 years with the balloon payment, I believe, in 20.
okay,
We can also refinance the bond or redo the bond in approximately 3 years after we complete, 2 years after we can, 2 to 3 years after we complete at no penalty.
that doesn't happen a lot, does it, with?
No, you have to negotiate those things when you do the original deal, but we have the ability to look at the deal in a few years, and it's actually because the clock starts ticking when we triggered the bond last January. It's 5 years is basically the 3 years after construction.
Okay, great, thank you.
I had 2 questions. That's okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, question number 1 for the STR regulatory fee, is that estimate based off of the same as we had this year or an increase in licenses?
The current business licenses.
Okay, so it could be, well, of course, it could always be more or be less. And then my second question is only slightly unrelated. Just wondering if the clerk's department has gotten any calls about the regulatory fee. Obviously, we need to vote on it again, but wondering.
It's Tiff. We've received, I think, 1 or 2 public comment emails against the regulatory fee. But no calls, just two emails so far.
I do think.
Okay, thanks.
Correct me if I'm wrong, staff, but in the EPS study, I think they did have some projections of short-term license growth that was pushing, upwards of 1.5 million, I think, for that fund. But I believe the number we have in our budget is just a snapshot of where we're at today, not trying to guess on what a future STR license number would be. Whether that's right or wrong, not sure, but that's what we've used.
Correct.
Okay. Here's a 7-year history of the revenues coming into the Affordable Housing Fund. Just starting at the bottom, the sales tax revenue in the blue, and then the short-term rental excise tax in green above that. property tax, 2 mil property tax revenue. They're in the peach, going up quite a bit in 2024. And then that housing mitigation fee staying the same at 700,000 for 2024. Then on the top, the short-term rental regulatory fee, 1.3 million. Okay, the airline guarantee fund accounts for the collection of the 2% excise tax on lodging rentals and sale of food and drinks served or furnished in restaurants and bars. This was effective January 1st, 2024. The money in this fund is to be used to support airline services at the Telluride and Montrose airports. 2% of this is retained in the general fund as an administrative fee, and the remainder is passed through to Telluride Montrose Air Organization. And also, we budgeted a 5% decrease on the missed tax revenue for 2024. The town lodgers tax fund accounts for the collection of the 2% lodgers tax on lodging rentals effective January 1st, 2022. The revenue is to be used exclusively to fund activities related to tourism or marketing of the Telluride community and managing the effects of tourism on the community. Other purposes include, but are not limited to, improving the wastewater treatment facility, acquisition and construction of property for affordable housing, and transportation services. You want to talk more about this one, Zoe?
I think I covered it.
The town lodgers tax fund. And the marketing.
Oh.
But,
Oh.
I'll just kind of go over some of the reallocations we did from the general fund since we met about that.
Sure.
We reallocated the communication manager labor costs into the town lodgers tax fund from the general fund, as well as community engagement and events, media support, and website maintenance from the general fund.
Yeah, so this is decently common as well. So for the lodgers tax fund, when you look at the purposes of that tax, it's for communication or for tourism, marketing. I can't remember the exact language as well. But it was felt like the town's communication costs also were appropriate to be part of that fund. So we moved those over. So this, then taking that, we have the remaining funds available for marketing. We felt like this was important to bring to council as we look to have a more balanced general fund as well, and to appropriately place other line items where they can go.
I think this was based on some conversations with some peer communities as well.
Exactly.
And how they are treating their lodgers fund and what overarchingly municipalities are looking at as their marketing and communications roll-up budgets and where they're funded through.
So it's 800,000 plus the 536,000.
Yes.
So the reallocated community events. Is that like 4th of July, or there's a separate line item that's for?
It's it is a broader line item than that, but yes, it does include 4th of July and anything that we might do for New Year's or anything that might also come up. And any other community engagement events. For instance, we're gonna have a community forum for our Jedi work. Any cost for that, so anything like those.
Okay.
The Conservation Trust Fund accounts for state of Colorado lottery funds to be used for parks and recreation services and capital investment. And it's a little bit more than $30,000 a year that we get in revenue.
How is that? Matt, like, how do they determine that we get $30,000? You have no idea.
Do not know the answer. to
Oh,
that
it's
question.
Stephanie will
Stephanie
tell us.
does.
It's
Well,
pretty
we must-
formulaic.
Yeah, it's per capita. I
Yeah.
believe. So like the standard amount that they issue on a biannual or quarterly,
Quarterly.
and Parks and Rec spends the revenue amount every year, the roughly 33,000 on equipment and some small projects, and then we maintain a balance in that account for unforeseen items, but we tend to not spend more than what is coming in every year to maintain a balance, and the balance is about 150,000 currently. And it has to be for recreation purposes, so capital or maintenance, but has to be tied to recreational purposes.
I think this year, Stephanie, did we not do our pool repairs out of that fund,
So
for
we were
example?
prepared to use our balance to do that, but since we didn't do the warming hub project, we had
That's right, we were gonna
capital
pull from
funds to
CA.
use it, but that would be a great example of the unforeseen project that needed to be done, that we would have tapped into our balance if that was our only option at that point.
Thanks.
Let you talk about the new child development. funds that we have.
Yeah, we've kind of talked a little bit about this when we were setting the rates. So we, per council's direction, we set the daily rate at $65 a day. And are going to implement the 50% town of Telluride employee discount. We've also initiated a couple other fees that are in line with industry trends, and that's a $25 late payment fee, a $15 per 15-minute late pickup fee. And we talked about the necessary staff to staff Elaine's Place to have Monday through Friday, 7:45 to 5:15 care, which would equate to an $85,000 subsidy in the general fund. Again, this is our first year having it under our belt, so all of this is under projected operation costs, but this is what we're budgeting for this year.
So I was talking with Kathleen Merritt yesterday, and she had mentioned that they had done some math and that it costs $100 per child per day. So to have a competitive wages, benefits, paid time off and all that. So does the $85,000 subsidy from general funds get us to that
Correct.
number? So that, okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, so in just, I think we've talked about this when we were discussing the rate. The town is motivated to also work with Bright Futures and Strong Start and all other regional childcare partners to come up with a far better and more succinct subsidy strategy. So that it is, so that collectively as a region, we don't all have to operate at some sort of deficit. While we are lucky, and this is why we're bringing this onto the town, that we are having a strictly financial subsidy that we're providing. Other childcare providers are doing it at an operational subsidy or cost. So just, yes, that is definitely the case, but there's going to be a much better subsidy strategy in the future of what that looks like, and where Strong Start and Bright Futures play a part.
That's great.
And Zoe, just to summarize for myself, in part that really means regionally, all of us, public, private, in between, charging the real cost of daycare. That's $100. It's $100 an hour, for example. But really, hopefully, continuing to see Bright Futures, Strong Starts grow, and that families be able to lean on them and tap into those subsidies through them for basically subsidy of their monthly payments, but charge what it actually costs, get your subsidies through that Strong Starts
Yeah.
system that we're all paying into as a community.
I think, yes, that is the ultimate goal. The real way to say it is that the hope is that everyone only pays 7% of their household income toward childcare. And the way to do that in the easiest way is to raise rates to affect the actual operation costs and then have that. While that's probably not going to be next year, because going from 65 to 100, even if there's a subsidy involved, is a lot for people to understand or swallow. And also we need to start looking deeper at where those subsidy funds are coming from. Strong Start has the 0.75 mil. Those revenues aren't enough to reach that goal. So we just need to start strategizing of what that looks like.
It brings in like $500,000 a year roughly, and
Yeah.
it's like a $2 million budget they have.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Strong Start, Bright Futures doing a lot more work of data gathering and creating a better white paper for that reality so we can start coming up with a strategy.
It's a good start.
But
It's a good start. We, you know, at least at the staff level, I think we've heard nothing but support from council throughout this process of creating this new child development fund. You know, for that level of subsidy, I think it's a huge benefit for the community to now be able to have 5-day a week, like you said, 7:45 to 5 PM childcare at Elaine's place. That's going to be a game changer for I think a lot of folks long term. So
yeah,
thanks for all the work that's gone into this.
yeah, and it's all an economics equation as well. Like there's plenty of models of how much this actually impacts and benefits our economy and how much money this will bring in. So while we're not truly seeing it here in the subsidy, there are revenue generating points to it in some sense.
Just to have a bigger picture of it, the housing that we give to Beehive for running that daycare, is there a yearly dollar amount associated with that, like a subsidy?
So, and Beehive is not in this fund. This is strictly Elaine's place.
Okay.
And Beehive, I believe, just has, the rent was just set at a lower rate, recognizing that would be an in-home childcare. So there isn't really a subsidy involved. It's just the rent for that unit was set at a certain rate.
Okay,
Yep, that's accurate.
All right.
Great, that's all for new funds that we haven't discussed yet. And then we'll go over some changes that we have made to some other funds, and all of the fund summaries in detail were provided in your packet. If you have questions on any others. For the general fund, we reallocated those community engagement and events, media support, website maintenance to the town lodgers tax fund, as well as the communications manager's labor cost to the town lodgers tax fund. We increased case to 7.5% per council direction and removed the assistant town attorney. Half of the compliance FTE was moved out of the general fund into water and wastewater. We increased the business license revenue by 50%, as well as the associated payment for marketing. And then reduced the festival attendance fee revenues to reflect the existing use fee, and increased some of the parks and rec fees for special events. So the change in fund balance decreased from $1.4 million to $757,000, which is a little bit different than what you had in your packet. I had to recalculate the marketing payment, which changed this a little bit. Any questions on the general fund?
Sorry, I'm forgetting what the reduced festival attendance fee revenue to reflect the existing use fee. Can you? say a little bit
We
more?
had a little bit of an increase in there for. That's me.
I just
So
forget,
staff-
sorry.
Yeah, staff was proposing a 5% increase to admission fees with our revenue estimates.
Uh-huh.
That was off cycle of the 5-year CIP, consumer index, whatever P is, price index.
Pricing deck.
CPI, I think. And so after further staff discussion, that would have taken 2 readings to change the code to make that adjustment. In replacement of that, staff is recommending that we implement more facility rentals and direct expense billing for events. We have started some thoughts on that process, and we'll have further discussions at the Parks and Rec Commission level on pricing philosophy. So once again, here's our expenses. How do we want to apply those to the different types of events that we have? Free events, paid events, nonprofit hosted events, for-profit hosted. So we'd like to have those discussions at the Parks and Rec Commission level starting in October 25th. You all will be notified of that. So we removed the 5% increase to admission fee, keeping that stable for 1 more year, and then revisiting it definitely during next year's budget process for potentially more than a CPI increase, if that's the desire at that point. But we did increase significantly some revenue accounts for Parks and Rec fees associated with utilities that that will likely be billed directly to events. We added a permit fee for all events, and on a graduated scale based on their size, minimal permit fee to capture some revenue from all events regardless of their structure. So that's a new revenue that we identified, and then facility rentals increasing our revenue there. So we're proposing to focus more on new fees with further discussions to follow on how that gets applied for all the different events that we have, and to keep admission fee where it is for this year or for next year, sorry. You want to add to that, Scott?
Well, I think, again, just big picture, looking at those two buckets, attendance fee and basically direct use and permit fees, it was going to be a really big spike to stack both of those all in 1 year right now. And again, as Stephanie articulated, having that broader discussion around fee philosophy when it comes to attendance fee is a really important one, not a short one probably, and takes 2 readings of the code. So felt like we'd heard clearly from council to ensure that we get those kind of direct use fees implemented this year, and give the attendance fee a little more time is our thought.
The additional revenues that are referenced up there total about $45,000. That is more than what a 5% admission fee
Mhm.
increase would have been as well.
Okay, sorry, so you already have a projected fee income that's based on the just standard permit fee for all events? And then, is that right? And then you're gonna ask Parks and Rec to also have a discussion about other fees? Sorry, I missed.
Yeah, so the admission fee, we'll separate that out at the moment. So these
Mhm.
additional Parks and Rec fees related to special events, that's an ongoing discussion that we've already started with Parks and Rec. We had quite a bit of discussion at your September budget discussion on general fund. So we are proposing a minor permit fee for all events, which would be subject to your fee resolution at your budget approval. So that would be $50 for minor events, $100 for medium events, $250 for major events. And that is a permit fee just to get the process started, to for some staff time. And that would be, even if somebody is hosting a completely free event on town property, they would be paying the town something, and it would be a limited amount. And that was direction that we were hearing, staff was hearing from council. If that's not the case, please let me know, because that would be in the fee resolution.
So essentially, it's like an application fee, this one that you're talking
Yes.
about. And then if there's a use fee, that's in addition to the
Exactly.
application fee.
And the use fee is
Yeah.
subject to the pricing philosophy, the fee philosophy that we talk about at every budget discussion, of kind of that pyramid approach. What's the community benefit? What's the type of organization who's asking for it? And that's what we would like to have at the Parks and Rec level as it applies to facility rentals, which are currently mostly included in the admission fee. But we're looking to separate some of those out so that we can get some cost recovery on direct expenses related to making those facilities, or lost revenue. So for example, the campground for a major festival that's currently included in the admission fee, we're suggesting that that be pulled out, and that if they pay what our lost revenue would be if we were operating. And we've started those discussions with the major events. And that seems reasonable to them. So those are the type of discussions that, or the research we've been doing, the projections on revenue that we've been making. So the permit fee would be a new revenue source, and then increasing campground revenue, field revenue, and stage and catering revenue, and recapturing direct utility costs. Each of those could go up by about $10,000.
Well, thanks for
That
the
answers.
clarification. I just wasn't sure what Parks and Rec was actually gonna be commenting on.
Yep, so they're gonna be
Thanks.
talking about use fees, as Jesse Ray put it, for facilities.
Cool.
And then how to apply that to all the different scenarios that we have.
Okay,
And that will be very much a collaborative discussion with events. One thing that events haven't had the opportunity of all sizes to really talk to Parks and Rec Commission, or even you all, about their existing expenses that they have separate from the town to utilize town facilities, because we are by no means turnkey. You come onto the stage and you spend a lot of money to make it usable. Same with the festival grounds in general, or Elk Park. I mean, we don't have a stage there. So for them to start informing and educating people about their expenses, and then also to talk about benefits to the community associated with events. So that's a much larger discussion.
The amount of money they make off of using our park needs to be part of that discussion.
Yeah, kind of, yeah, a more holistic.
Yep.
View of. Yeah, all things, expenses, revenues,
Yep.
impacts, benefits.
So what, just to kind of summarize what council, as part of this budget, it would be the existing admission fee, which is that graduated scale based on size of event. That would be a part of your budget approval at the next meeting through the fee resolution, and then a new permit fee. Is there any feedback on the permit fee? Did we understand your direction correctly on that? I mean, independent of being a nonprofit.
I'm okay with the permit fee structure that you have now. As long, at first I
it's a
thought that
new
was gonna be the
fee.
use,
Yeah.
the use fee, and I was like, that's on now.
Right, that's a new fee, just
Yeah.
to be clear. But yeah, so any concerns with that before it shows up in your fee resolution?
Sorry, so you just said something about nonprofits. Are you expecting that they don't get charged or they do?
I mean, the direction I heard is everybody pays something. But we might hear from some of those very small events that offer free programming, and $50 is gonna potentially break the bank for them. So, I mean, we're not proposing the exemption process or anything else, but just wanted to put that out there. A new fee, I mean, Scott and I've talked about it. We think it's reasonable. We think it's meeting the direction that we've heard at the council level, but
Yeah.
it would be applied across the board
I
for
think
every event using town property.
Yeah, I mean, there's institutions offering free events, but $50 for application fee would not even cover the cleanup probably for any event. So like, we have to look at it from
Right, yeah,
every direction.
You're supposed to clean up your own event, A.
Well, it's a
My
ever,
only comment would be, could people throw their trash somewhere in the park? This is like a separate thing. I'll talk about it, later. Talk to you about it later. I think if people are going to be paying that fee, then there could be some like minor things that would make it easier for them.
So once
Like
again, a
trash.
permit fee, not a use fee, but Amanda is already looking at streamlining the permitting process to be more online and collecting payments online, things that would make it easier for the events. But this is not gonna be a use fee. That's gonna be a separate discussion, and how that gets applied would not be across the board, likely the same way for all size events, types of events. But the permit fee would be a standard, and it's submitting an application, whether it's for Case, Parks and Rec, it's the contracts, all these events that use town property, over 40 of them, we contract with every year, and that obviously has a lot of time. It's not an administrative fee, it's a permit fee, so I think just keeping that clear to all the fee discussion.
I mean, I think it's reasonable. I work for a nonprofit that had an event at the park, and Ryan was there to help us if we needed anything. Like, his time cost money and we needed something, and he was there to help us, and we had to move some things around, and like that's just part of the deal. If you have a space and someone's there to help you, then you should be paying for it. Even if we do get Case dollars, it's still like different funds. And I mean, I think it's reasonable.
I agree. I mean, I think the fee is reasonable. I think the one thing I just want us to caution, in the future is that these free events are really just an incredible community benefit for people that live here, work here, that can't afford a full price ticket. And, I am a believer that we need more moments when the community can kind of gather without it being, financially prohibitive to them individually or to their families. So this particular fee feels like a reasonable amount. I just want to kind of go on record that I just want us to be very mindful of that, because as you said, and as I know very well, the cost to actually produce a free event are substantial. And I think once you see those numbers, you start to realize where some of the pushback can come on, because I think that these organizations do want to provide these free events. I think we just need to make sure that it's reasonable to be able to continue to ask them to do so.
And initial discussions with Parks and Rec Commission is not wanting to assess a use fee for those scenarios, but the permit being a separate discussion. But yeah, I think Parks and Rec Commission agrees, wanting to encourage those free events to the community and not make it cost prohibitive.
And so are you, sorry, there's so many layers to your guys' different events. Are you anticipating that if someone wants to reserve the bra, then they pay $50
So
also?
that's a private
Okay.
event. We're
Okay.
focused on special events right now. We are at the staff level talking about maybe a reservation fee similar to what we're doing for the tennis courts, where it's not a usage fee, but it gives you the ability to reserve it. So whether we start or when we start rolling this out for private events, those discussions are going on at the same time. But the council discussions have been more focused on special events
Okay,
this year based on requests that you all had over the last budget cycle.
but in that same vein, there's people who have historically made reservations of the park that you're now asking to become special events because they've historically been reserving, like the community fiesta, for example.
So a special event is a gathering open to the public,
Uh-huh.
and a private event is a wedding party or a birthday party and kind of more of an invite list. So the community fiesta, yes, falls more into the special event vein. And so a permit fee would be applicable to that example.
Okay, but historically, they were reservation. I'm just saying that there are events that have occurred that maybe seem special events, but they were actually reservations, and that those people are going to have to now start paying, and that is gonna be a change, and they might push back on you on becoming a special event. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. So much more discussions at the Parks and Rec Commission meeting on October 25th related to usage fees and pricing philosophy. So you all will be invited to that meeting and encouraged to attend along with event organizers.
And Stephanie, at our next council meeting, I believe you're doing a 2023 special event wrap up as well, in summary of.
All
Well,
events on town property. So
Exactly.
you'll see the breakdown of how many events are hosted by a for-profit compared to a nonprofit, how many are exclusive use versus non-exclusive use. So working on that at the moment.
Mhm.
All right.
Thanks, Steph.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Some minor changes to the capital fund. We increased the 2023 projected year-end real estate transfer tax revenue up to $6 million from 5.6 million. And then the 2024 budget from 6 million to 6.24 million. Leaving us with a fund balance of 2.2 million or 14.18% reserves.
And what do you have a goal for capital reserves or not? Just general fund?
The current goal for capital is 25%.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we really just last year started to have that conversation a little more significantly around trying to reach a 50% general reserve fund, and we got about to 45% last year. If I
50% right now.
45 last year. Right now, we're looking at right around 51%. So that's great to be able to build that up. Again, we don't want to do so at the detriment of getting projects done, if you will, and funding projects fully, but I think we're finding a pretty good balance there.
Well, I guess I asked that because at our, I don't know, some meeting ago, budget meeting, we had talked about the 25% goal being reasonably adjusted, knowing that we now have a reserve capital improvement fund. And it seems like you're saying that 14% in reserve staff is comfortable with.
Very comfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we are looking at what some other municipalities have for their reserve policies,
Okay. Cool.
mainly in general fund and capital funds.
Great.
Where do we compare to them?
Next year. I mean, some have 0 reserves in the capital fund.
Right.
And
I've
it
seen
can be
ranges
spent
from
down to
0 to
zero.
50%.
Yeah.
You know, I certainly, from a capital improvement fund standpoint, anything above 25% to me feels like we're just not utilizing our dollars very wisely. And I think all of our goal is to get projects done on the ground rather than continue to, I shouldn't say continue, but to build really large reserves. It just doesn't feel like that time in history for us to sit on those dollars when there's so much to get done out around the community right now.
And just a reminder, we do have all the requested capital projects in the capital fund. We just moved out the municipal buildings one more year, which wouldn't fit in this fund balance anyway.
Yeah.
Like we do that every year.
I know, we have to do that.
I will say we're excited to be on the brink of releasing an RFP around facilities master plan that it's been talked about for a long time. With Zoe's leadership on that, we've got some momentum there, and Public Works is, as you know, already done that in the midst of their own campus master planning. But from a facility standpoint, again, we're now moving solidly, I think, into this study and design phase, with hopefully our capital fund being able to absorb some of those bigger facility costs in a couple of years.
I think my only concern here is that I know that, for the past couple of years, we've been talking about this recession, but like just in the past maybe month or two, I've heard from people in the financial world that cities are starting to see some effects of this recession trends, and we're usually like 8 to 12 months behind the rest of the country. So I guess just making sure that this is on our radar and that we are financially prepared. I know that we have some measurements in place, staffing wise for recessions, but a town still has to operate on a very full capacity.
Yeah, you bet. I think that's accurate, that you certainly see those economic impacts hit a little more quickly in some of the bigger metropolis than you do in more resort communities like ours. Again, depending on the nature of a recession, we're feeling like we've got not an overly cautious, but I think a conservative budget here where it matters most. And again, we've got I think a really well thought out recession plan in place. It's a 3-tiered recession plan that certainly touches projects and some different operational spending before it hits would hit staffing, obviously. And we were able to move through that well in the last few years, but I think it's more refined than it has been in the past even, and feel good that we've got that as a backstop, if you will, if we do start to see real national recession in 2024.
Okay.
In the housing funds, we also have made some changes, and this includes Shandoka, Sunnyside, and Virginia Placer. And the biggest changes with the labor costs, we reallocated those to be more in Shandoka and less in Virginia Placer and Sunnyside. And then we decreased all the utility costs for Shandoka, knowing that parts of Building F will be offline for all of 2024. Do you want to talk about this one at all? We would like for Delaney to have a year before we really make any big changes.
Yeah, so obviously Delaney is new in her role. I'm just taking a fresh set of eyes on the budget. So before we make any large adjustments to previous precedent, just having her a year under her belt to manage those budgets. So this is kind of where we've landed.
Yeah, we did look at some options based on comments from the last enterprise fund meeting. So we just kind of looked at how far out we would have to go for the rents to cover the expenses. And we didn't include any capital expenditures. And in Virginia Placer, the debt makes up 70% of that total budget. So we carried out all other expenses at a 4% increase and then used the actual debt payments. And for Virginia Placer, rent would need to increase 21% in 2025 to cover the costs with the current budget. with a 5% increase annually, it would cover its cost by 2029. And with a 10% rent increase annually, it would cover its cost by 2027.
Is Delaney on?
Yes.
I'm just curious what the 5 and 10% is in real dollars theoretically.
In red.
In rent, yeah,
I get like-
Increases.
yeah, if it's,
No, I don't.
are we talking $25? Are we talking 150? I mean, I could think about this and do the math myself, but it's more fun to ask you guys.
Part of the issue that's going on here is that the rents right now, and I just looked at this last week, to help out, but the rents are not reflective of what the AMIs were set by the town of THA. They're still below the 88% AMI for the 2 bedrooms, the 60% for the 1 bedrooms. That's the issue, and that was caused by not having rents reflect CPI changes over the initial years, and then also doing some things in COVID. So those rents should catch up to what the intended AMIs are. There's different ways to go about doing that. What Kaylee outlined here was a kind of a pretty drastic. There's a way to phase that in a little bit more. And in speaking with Delaney, it seems like, as she's understanding how the operations work on the rental housing side, that there may be some efficiencies that can be caught on the operational side. So the operational expenses may get tighter, and then the rents can catch up to what they ought to be, but not in a drastic way. And then it'll start becoming cash neutral. The good news, if there is good news on this, is that that fund has a balance as a reserve of 200,000 to 300,000. So it's actually a healthy fund. Right now, we're trying to catch up the revenue expenses to the operational expenses. So both of those need some adjustment to tighten that up.
My big concern here is thinking about the individuals and whether or not they're gonna be fiscally capable of meeting these, like, will they be making 5% more, a month, or even, 10 to 20%? I know I've talked to several people in affordable housing that Sunnyside, that this last 7% increase was like almost broke the bank, and they were gonna have to move out because, there's other cost of living expenses too. So when you can compound them all together, people are looking at these huge increases for their personal overheads, and they're just not making the same amount of money. So like, how do we?
Well,
It's just like already, it's kind of stressing me out.
Yeah, it is.
about.
Well, I think this is again, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but right now we continue to propose just a 3.5% increase on all of our properties. This is a bit of an exercise, if you will, to look at what we would have to increase to cover costs by 2027, by 2029, for example. But right now, kind of based on what we've heard from council over these last number of weeks and months, I just want to be clear to those listening that we're only proposing a 3.5% increase that more or less matches with CPI in this. Again, that's nothing to a lot of people. That's not a small increase for some, but that's I think this is an important exercise for us to kind of look at, of kind of, again, to Lance's point, maybe why we haven't increased over time at Virginia Placer, and where we're at, reflective of some of those AMI goals, which were, did you say 88% was the initial
Yeah,
Virginia
60,
Placer goal?
60 and 88.
Yeah.
The boarding house is at 47 or so, but that's a different.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, I think, a 10% rent increase is absolutely insane. I mean, to be candid, don't even want to ever see that on a slide again. Like, that's, it would never work. It's irresponsible for us to do to the people that are living in those units. So if we could it would be lovely to be caught up by 2027, but not at the expense of the people that are living there.
Yeah.
I mean, and I tend to agree with Jesse, 5% even. I'd like to hear what those actual numbers are, but that's still pretty substantial. Even, I mean, I'm assuming we're talking maybe 60 plus a unit per person, and that's not small money, and when you're talking about
people that are living and working in a community that does have such a high cost of living. And so I think I'd like, when we start talking about this further, like seeing real numbers, just like Adrian said, like seeing what that actually is going to look like is going to be a lot more indicative of where our support's going to be than what that percentage is. Cause I think we want to see real dollars and know how many meals that is.
We do have Delaney Taps and
Yeah.
I know her hands up.
Sorry,
but
I just want
camera's
to
not
follow up
working.
really quickly on what you're saying, Mian. Like, I think saying a blanket 10% is absurd, is a hard place to be, because that also means that historically in some places rents haven't been increased. And when we look at the AMIs of Shandoka, they're incredibly low. And there's a lot of people who make more money than those AMIs that live in those places. And so it's way more complicated than just like a 10% increase. Like I get the Sunnyside is at a higher percentage because we have different target AMIs, and we didn't tell people who were a lower AMI of their income that they couldn't live in the other higher end rent units. And there's a lot of people that do. So they're like barely making ends meet because they chose to live in a unit that's more expensive. So anyway, it's just like very nuanced and complicated. And I think making like blanket statements like that is harmful to like the goal that we are trying to do as a town, which is balance all the AMIs of all of our community members and make sure that people have a place to live. But anyway, that's just my personal.
No, I
opinion.
mean, I understand what you're
Housing.
saying. I just think that we can do that in a way, and maybe it's gonna take a little bit longer to get there. But I
Mhm.
think that I would rather see that be a gradual increase versus 10% year over year, if all remains constant.
Okay.
Well, and I don't think you can compare Shandoka to Virginia Placer or Sunnyside. It's not apples to apples, because of the starting point of rent for the individuals that got in there. But I do agree that there's probably a little more room with some people in Shandoka, but I also don't know, like I don't know what everybody's income is in Shandoka, and I don't know what everybody's income is in any of our affordable housing units. I do know that like people aren't making 5% more a year doing the same job like that. When you look at it from that perspective, like, and the cost of living here continuously goes up, whether it's groceries, whether it's gas, whether it's daycare, whether it's whatever. So like, when we're talking about this demographic of people, I think that having gentle increases in rent, not just 7.5 or 7% that we just saw at Sunnyside. I'm totally okay with the 3.5%, but I think also there needs to be like a lot of information dissemination saying like, you can, and more than we do, just because people get caught up in their day-to-day lives and they forget. And a lot of people that live in our affordable housing units are in food and beverage industry, and they're out of work for 3 to 4 months a year and nothing's coming in. So I think it's just being conscientious of the individuals and our running a town is, we have to find that balance. And we can't just hit people with these huge increases. To Mian's point, 10% is a lot more at Sunnyside than it probably would be at Shandoka. But I'd rather see, the hours required for people to live in Shandoka increase before we did a rent increase.
I mean, I think that's, yeah, I mean,
No, I mean,
philosophically,
we could
you and I
go-
are
we
on the
could-
same
we
page.
could go down that level.
Because like it allows them to pay those rents. But anyway, yeah, let's not talk about that. No.
Good exercise.
Yeah, that's
Good
exactly what it is. It was an
exercise.
exercise. Great conversation.
And then there's one additional fee that we're requesting that didn't make it into the packet, and that is a $100 fee for staff to go out and reread a water meter at the request of a customer. That's all I have today.
Thanks.
That's it.
Perfect.
Thanks, Kaylee.
What if we did, how many requests do you get like annually for the water meter reads? Just for my own personal
I don't
knowledge.
know that.
But
Yeah.
I think Val's got some
Yeah,
ideas.
no, it's a great question, and really with this reread, as we move towards new technology, it is easiest to pull those meter reads remotely. But what it's being used as is treating our town staff as a plumber to troubleshoot the system. And so what we're trying to avoid is, if there's a reread request and it's legitimate that there is an issue with the meter, there's no charge for that. But it's trying to prevent, using our staff to find a leak in their irrigation when they should be hiring a plumber. And so that's just to encourage that, disencourage that from happening. But I would say every bi-monthly read, you get a huge list of rereads that come up just due to high usage. And so just trying to limit that. It's taking about a half a day of our time, our staff's time to do the rereads.
So it's not necessarily that people are requesting them, it's that you guys are seeing some data that insinuates that there needs to be a reread.
Yeah, so there are those to where if we see a trend, we'll definitely establish that reread just for our comfort to understand. But when we're getting specific individuals, residents, property management calling in saying we want to reread, come in and having our guys turn off or try to identify if the meter's still, spinning while the water's off, but that's really what they should be doing with a licensed plumber. So it's really just eliminating from residents, commercial, calling in those rereads. But if we identify something as a trend, we will do the reread at no cost.
Okay.
And then if we do establish it as a meter issue, again, cost to the customer. But it's, it's trying to get people to take accountability for the property, irrigation, make sure all that gets tested prior to, start up, turn off, and then during the season as well. If, sprinkler head breaks, pops off, and your bill is high, it's really should be on the onus of the property owner to identify that, and not call in for a reread. Kind of hopefully avoid.
Great.
And then did you have a specific number on how it reads?
I can find that out.
Okay.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other questions for staff in regards to these funds? Ava? No? Perfect. So then we'll move on to work session 1B, the overview of the 2024 budget and goals and objectives.
So we've already gone through this before with council. Again, this is a summary of what we worked from. Oh, I feel like it was a couple months ago now, reflecting town council's goals and objectives as mirrored by what staff's focus is on for 2024, with the addition of the recommended changes from council, which was moving the affordable housing goals and objectives up into infrastructure, and the addition of some other small goals that are reflected in the current goals and objectives. We will also have this in the 2024 adopted as well. But really, again, the purpose of this is showing the money that we have now allocated within the 2024 budget, exactly the purpose of those funds and how they align with what council is hoping to see in the next year. We will then use our ClearGov strategic planning software to track all of these goals and objectives throughout the year. And even more importantly, show the fund, God, I'm really loud, the fund allocations associated with which, showing kind of how that's prioritized within the budget. So I'm not going to go into line by line again because we don't have that many changes from what we did last time, but I'll just open it up to see if council has any additional questions as we continue to finalize it for next week.
No, I think everybody's been doing like incredible work on this. And we've like moved things around in goals and objectives, and yeah, staff, you guys have done a killer job on goals and objectives and our budget stuff, and it's 6 years up here, and like this has been one of the most seamless falls I've ever experienced. So it's been nice.
That's great. Thank you for that feedback. And thank you, yes, to town staff. Everyone's put a lot of extra work into that.
Thanks. Geneva, do you have any questions? Okay.
Do want to just reflect, right, it made some written comment to staff that he had some concerns around building F specifically being called out as a and goals and objectives. And I think we've talked about that issue at quite a bit of length, but I wanted to pass that comment along.
I don't know how to respond to that.
You can come to one of our housing meetings and you can debate it with.
I don't,
Dan and I.
but I'm
We've
okay
done it
with
like
it being
7
on,
times.
I'm okay with it being on goals and objectives.
Well, me too.
All right.
Want to reflect that.
Absolutely. Okay. With no other discussion, we are adjourned at 10:20.
What's happening?
Wow.
You're welcome, everyone.